Hi, class. This is Miss Wisnowski. It's time for the Bell Bandit. Now, we have been reading in class before we had to go to virtual learning, and we got into chapter 4. So I'm on page 46 of chapter 4. What had just happened is that Evan had just met Maxwell. So, Evan was asking him what grade he was in, and he was telling him in 6th grade. Then Mom came home. So Jesse shouted, "Mom's home," running for the front door. Evan had heard it too, the old Subaru making its way up the long driveway. He hurried back into the kitchen. He wanted to get the trash barrel outside before his mom walked in. He was carrying it down the makeshift back steps he and Pete had rigged up when Pete came around the house. "Your grandma's home, so I'm heading out for the day," said Pete. "We'll hang the drywall tomorrow. Then we'll start on the upstairs the next day. Sound good?" "Yeah, sure," said Evan. He wanted to sound casual about it so Pete wouldn't think that this was the first construction job he'd ever done. But he couldn't keep the eagerness out of his voice. "Okay, then. See you tomorrow." Pete plugged in his headphones and headed for his truck. Evan walked back into the kitchen and took one more look around. It was definitely a disaster area, but they had accomplished a lot. The wall was repaired and the back door was framed and hung, and you could walk up and down the back steps if you were careful. Plus, it was a whole lot cleaner than it had been an hour ago. When Evan heard voices, mostly Jesse's, in the living room, he hurried to say hello. His grandmother stood just inside the doorway next to the coat rack and umbrella stand. Her winter parka was draped over her shoulders as if it were a cape, and Evan could see that her arm was in a cast, cradled in a sling hanging around her neck. She fumbled one-handed with the coat until Evan's mother took it from her and hung it up on the rack. Evan watched as Jessie tried to grab hold of Grandma's hand, but Grandma pulled her hand in, hunching forward protectively, and covered the sling with her good arm, as if she was afraid someone might try to steal something away from her. She began to walk around the middle of the room, taking small steps, which was not at all the way his grandmother usually walked. Then she stopped and looked at the stairs that led to the second floor and then back to the front door. It was her face that surprised Evan the most. It looked pale, and she had bags under her eyes, which Evan had never noticed before. Most of all, she couldn't seem to settle her gaze on anything. Her eyes kept flitting around the room like a bird that wouldn't perch on any one thing. Jesse was hopping around like a bird too, chattering non-stop about the bell. Maxwell was walking behind them, carrying on his own conversation and making a strange puffing noise that sounded like he was trying to blow feathers out of his mouth. Evan's mother had an arm around his grandmother's shoulder, guiding her slowly toward the couch. And when Evan caught sight of his mother's face, he knew right away that something was very wrong. "Hi, Grandma," said Evan cheerfully from across the room, but Grandma didn't look at him. "She's tired," said his mom. "Jesse, would you please stop asking so many questions? Grandma needs a couple of minutes to get used to being home." "Why?" asked Jesse. Why do you need to get used to being home, Grandma? That doesn't make any sense." "Jesse," said Evan, feeling a little panicked. What he really wanted to do was run up to his mother and get a hug from her, but with Maxwell standing right there was no way he was going to do that. "Come see the kitchen, Grandma," said Jesse. "See how good it looks." "Jesse," warned her mother, "you need to slow down." "A cup of tea," said Grandma. "That's what I need. A good, strong cup of green tea." She started to walk toward the kitchen. Evan hurried ahead of her, scooping up 2 last stray nails that were on the Formica counter. Then he stood beside the patched hole. His mother and Grandma walked into the kitchen, trailed by Jesse and Maxwell, who had finally stopped talking. Everyone looked at Evan and the repair work that he and Pete had done that day, and his grandmother's face spoke first. "What is this? What has happened here?" "Mom," said Miss Tresky, "there was a fire. Do you remember the fire?" "Where's my stove? How am I going to make tea without a stove?" "The stove was ruined, Grandma," said Jesse. "They had to take it out because it was no good anymore." "What do you mean, Jesse?" asked Grandma. "Who did this? Where was I?" She looked at Miss Tresky. "Susan, what's been going on here?" "Mom, you don't see that every day," said Maxwell, rocking back and forth nervously. His right hand snapped in the air like he was cracking the whip of an imaginary horse. "No, you certainly don't, Maxwell," said Evan's grandma. "You certainly don't." "Grandma," said Evan, "it's going to be okay. Me and Pete are fixing the whole thing. We're going to work more tomorrow. We'll get it the way it was before." Evan could feel that bad feeling rising up in him, the feeling he got just before taking a test, the feeling he sometimes got late at night when the house was too quiet and too dark and he wished his dad had never left. For the first time that afternoon, Evan's grandmother looked right at him. She peered sharply at his face and then looked him over from top to bottom. She turned to Evan's mom. "Who is that boy?" she asked angrily. "Did he do this to my kitchen?" "Mom," said Evan's mom, "it's Evan, your grandson." Evan's grandmother shook her head. "I don't even know him. Make him go away." Now, we already know that Evan had a hard time with the way that his grandmother would forget who he was. So we know that ending the chapter on that note leaves Evan in a little bit of a sad feeling for his grandmother's memory. So, boys and girls, the next video will be the next chapter. And the next chapter is called 1,000 Pieces. And I will try to get that video ready tomorrow. See you next time.